November 3rd, 2023, on a Friday night at 8:20 p.m., I had made the most important decision I was ever going to make in my whole entire life. I gave my life to Jesus. How did all of this happen? So, kind of my whole life. Never grew up in a religious family. God was never really pushed onto me. I remember growing up as a kid from, I believe, first grade all the way to fourth grade. I went to CCD. It was basically the Catholic school every Monday, and I absolutely hated it. It was kind of going through the CCD to work up to my communion, confirmation, all that stuff. I believe I only got to my communion, but I went to CCD every Monday and absolutely hated it. I was a young kid and I hated it because, I thought it was boring. I didn't understand what I was being taught. I thought it was just another form of school. And I wanted nothing to do with it. It felt like it was kind of just being forced onto me. And I was just a young kid. I just wanted to play outside. I didn't really care for it. I didn't understand what I was even being taught, the importance of Jesus and following him. And that's a big thing that kind of pushed me away from, Catholics. Listen, I've nothing wrong with Catholics. I'm not here to judge any type of religion, but the reason that I don't, associate myself with any specific type of religion, the reason I went with Christianity is because the sole focus is based on principles in the Bible, right? The whole point of Christianity is giving your life to Christ and actually living for him, not, you know, doing these man-made religious practices and all that type of stuff. No, it's just focused on giving your life to Christ and living for him, building a relationship with Jesus. That's what I stand by and that's what I believe in. But apart from that, I'm not here to judge anyone's religion or anything like that. I think the most important thing is as long as you worship Jesus and you give your life to him and you build a relationship with him, doesn't matter what, religion you associate with. I think that's single-handedly the most important thing you can do. But apart from that, I wanted nothing to do with it. And I remember after fourth grade, I had moved to Texas. Me and my family moved to Texas. My dad, just thought it would be a way better life out there. And he was right. We moved out to Texas and I stayed there from fifth grade all the way till seventh grade. And I had decided, when I got to Texas, I begged my mom not to put me back in CCD. I didn't want to go back. I wanted nothing to do with it. And growing up, me and my family never went to church or anything like that. Like I said, again, it wasn't really pushed onto me. And, I remember going to church a couple times, for like Christmas Eve or Easter. But it was something I just never really enjoyed as a young kid. I didn't want to do it. I didn't understand it. And it wasn't until my senior year of high school. So basically lived in Texas from fifth grade till seventh grade. And then at the end of seventh grade, my parents actually got divorced. And my dad stayed in Texas. Me, my mom, and my two sisters moved back to New Jersey. And honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. As much as I loved Texas, made great friends there, beautiful state, amazing state. Sports was really good. I seriously wouldn't change anything because everything I've been through has solely led up to the position that I'm in now. And I wouldn't change anything. It was all God's way of doing things for a reason. But yeah, coming back to Jersey, kind of reunited with the friends I grew up with, and basically from there, kind of, starting eighth grade, made new friends, reunited with my old friends. Everything was good, and still was kind of just living my own way, no, kind of nothing to acknowledge Jesus or anything like that. More so just living for myself, doing stupid stuff, typical stuff that a young kid would do. And it wasn't until I think more so my junior year of high school. My junior year of high school, I started to kind of like knew of God, knew there was a God, knew God was real. But again, I was still living for myself, living in sin. I wasn't, in any way, shape, or form actively trying to build a relationship with God or anything of that sort. I was just living for myself. And at this point, I had gotten into a relationship, um, one of my first relationships, right? That was actually real. And that, kind of went through that all the way through, leading up to my senior year. During my senior year, this was where I really actually started to, I guess, seek God in a way. I think senior year of high school was the first time I had actually prayed ever in my life. And the only reason I did was I was more so using God as a genie. I was only going to God when I actually needed something. And then, I just prayed that He would answer my prayer, give me what I needed. And then that was it. Still living for myself, wanted nothing to do with them. Very, very selfish. And I didn't understand Christianity or the importance or anything like that. And, I was only going to God during my senior year football season of high school because I had a really bad lower back injury and I was in and out of the orthopedic the whole year, getting drugged up, trying to just be able to play through the pain and get me through the season. And you guys know, like with a lower back injury, it was muscular, but especially being a wide receiver and I was a defensive back, like just having to, break down, make quick turns, change direction, all that stuff, jump in the air for a pass, it's not good on your back. Like your lower back is basically like what kind of supports everything. And it was really, really painful, almost unbearable. And I refused to miss anything, my senior year. Like it started in training camp during the summer, and I remember I had to miss the first game, and it was horrible. I missed the first game of my senior year, and then the second game, they only let me play defense. I didn't really get to play offense, and it sucked. It really sucked. So that's why the whole rest of the season, no matter how bad it got, I was just playing through it. And I remember waking up on, Saturday mornings or Sunday mornings, like the day after a game, like I felt like I had gotten hit by a truck. Like I literally just like couldn't get out of bed. My back was in shambles. It was so bad. Sometimes I would have to skip like the first or second practice of the week as well, just to get some more rest in and out of the trainer's office. Like it was just really, really bad. And I remember I was just praying to God this whole season, this whole entire season, to just get me through it, help me. It was unbearable. And He did. I had ended up somehow, and like I'm telling you, this is nothing of my own doing, but with a lower back injury, I not only broke the receptions record for, amount of receptions within a year, which hadn't been broken since I believe 1989 or something at my school. So I broke the receptions record, and then I also broke the receiving yards record. So I had broken two records, and all of my hard work that I have put in, all those years kind of leading up to that senior year had finally paid off. And if it wasn't for God, I wouldn't have been able to get through that injury and be able to do something like that. It was incredible, and I couldn't believe it. And, after that, after the season was over, I went all in on, the gym and, decided that I didn't want to, play college football and I was just going to focus on the gym, and that's what I wanted to do. It was what I was passionate about. Still not really wanting anything to do with God. He gave me what I wanted during the season, and then that was it. I did my own thing. And it wasn't until my first year of college where things really got real, because that summer after I had graduated high school, it was, just a lot of partying, drinking, grad parties, doing really stupid stuff. This was where I was actually at a point with my physique too, where I had made a significant amount of progress. So I was obviously getting more attention. My ego was higher. And I had actually broken up with my girlfriend, I remember early June, just to go mess around the whole summer at grad parties and all that stuff. And I'd thrown that away. And then, during that summer, I felt on top of the world. I felt free, and then eventually all the grad parties and everything kind of came to an end. And it was August. And that's when I felt really low. I felt really miserable. I had realized what I did, and I actually reached out back out to that girl that I was with, and got back together, um, which I think was also probably shouldn't have done, but I did. And what happened was, going into college that first year was the most miserable year of my life. This was by far the most miserable year of my life, but this is also what set up the greatest, turn of events within my life, the trajectory of my life. This is the year that set that up. So my first year of college, absolutely miserable. Hated it, hated everything about it. I was isolated. All of my friends had went away to a big party school out of state, some to Tampa, some to other schools, while I was like one of the only dudes who stayed back home in my hometown and, went to school there. And I kind of felt like a loser almost. I was just like, all these guys are going to big schools and I'm still at my mom's house going to community college. Like, I don't know. But I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And I knew I didn't really want college, but I didn't have the courage to drop out yet. So I was super miserable. I remember I went to visit the girl that I was with at the time. What really broke me was she actually went to Tennessee. So I was having to do long distance with her as well while all of my friends went away. And it was miserable. Really, really miserable. I hated my life. It was so bad. And I remember October for Halloween. This is when, I was just so miserable. I was so depressed. And I'd went up to a school to go to a frat party, which was really, really dumb. But I did it. And I kind of just drank all the pain away. I was in a really low point in my life. Just was, drinking out of depression. I had had a whole fifth of Tito's almost a whole fifth. There was about that much left in the bottle. And I had drank all of that. And I remember I was at the frat party. I had, all of a sudden, like it was fun until it wasn't. All of a sudden, I remember I couldn't stand up. I couldn't really walk. I went outside and I just passed out on the grass. I literally blacked out. And they had to call the ambulance. And I remember waking up in the hospital at 4:30 a.m. to my mom walking in, and this was my rock bottom. This was the lowest point in my life. I couldn't believe how I was living. I couldn't believe I had just done something like that. My mom was worried sick because she didn't even know if I was alive. She just got a call that I was in the hospital and, I was unconscious, and it was really, really bad. I scared her to death. And I just, I couldn't believe it. This was like my bottom moment, but this was actually what got me to start pursuing God, because I had realized that I had drank enough alcohol. The doctor said that it could have potentially killed me if I didn't get to the hospital. They almost had to pump me. So it was really, really bad and really serious. I had enough alcohol to literally kill me. And I saw this as, you know, God giving me another chance at life. That's what I saw it as. I was like, God literally just gave me another chance at life, and I can't mess it up this time. Like, I have to take this serious. And from that moment on, I not only went all in on my relationship with God and I started seeking Him more, but I also went all in on the gym, all in on my personal development. I started, reading books. I started researching things online, how to make money, and I started to plan my escape out of college. And what happened was, I had finally convinced my parents to let me drop out. I told them I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to stay in college. This isn't for me. I want to go my own route, right? So when the last semester was over of that year, I had finally made my way out of college. I literally, like, all my last exams, everything, like, I didn't study, nothing. I just showed up, took the test, that was it. I knew I was dropping out. I'm pretty sure I failed every class I took. But I knew there was no coming back. My mom was even like, listen, like, you know, if you decide you want to do your own thing for a year, take a gap year, but you want to go back, you'll still have it. And I was like, no, I'm never going back to that place. Like, I will literally do anything but go to college. But I promised her, I was like, I will figure something out. And I was confident in that. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I was going to figure something out. And that's when, literally, I dropped out of college. I made that decision to do that. And then that summer of 2023 is where everything changed. Everything. I was at a point where I was really starting to get serious with my relationship with God. I was praying consistently morning and night. I was getting into the Bible more. I was talking to God more. And I was learning the importance of actually building a relationship with Him. I felt myself getting closer to God. I felt the peace. I felt the purpose. I felt the direction in my life, and it felt right. And I cut out, the vices I was doing, all that stupid stuff. And that summer of 2023, when I made that decision to drop out of college, that was when life hit me. That was when I knew life was real. And I knew there was no time to mess around. I had to figure something out. So that's when, June of 2023, I first started to post on social media. I started on TikTok. I started posting 5 times a day for 3 months. I told myself, I don't care how many views I get. I don't care how many followers I gain. I'm going to post 5 times a day for 3 months, and I'm going to see what happens. I'm willing to do more volume than everyone else. I'm going to commit to this. I don't care if I don't have the information. I'm going to do the volume, do more reps than everyone, and I'm going to grow. And I forced it. And that's what you have to do. That's the mindset you have to have. And, I did it. And that whole summer was the most transformational summer in my life. I had started to gain traction on TikTok my second month. Got really good at making videos. I was growing my audience. I remember every morning, right? Like I was just in this like locked in routine. I felt like I was in a tunnel. Like literally that whole summer, I saw my friends maybe twice. Like I wasn't drinking. I wasn't doing vices. I wasn't going out. I was literally in a tunnel. I'm telling you, I woke up every single morning at 5:30 or 6 a.m. I prayed right away. I stretched. I meditated. I drank my 32 ounces of water. I journaled. I was reading my books. You know, everything was literally dialed into a T. I still have those journals from that time. Everything's documented. I would journal my morning thoughts. I would journal what I was feeling. I had my whole routine, like my whole day planned out. Everything was down to the T. Every single second of my day was maximized to the fullest potential. And I remember having that morning routine, and then after like my fasted cardio and I would eat breakfast, I would go outside and I would literally just sit out there and look into the woods and drink my coffee and just talk to God about, where I wanted my life to head, my goals, why I was working so hard towards this, and gave me so much peace in what I was doing. And that was the summer that I actually learned that, you know, I don't need anyone else but God. I went through that lonely period, and it not only showed me who I was and what I was capable of, and I learned a lot about myself, but I also realized that like I don't need anyone else but God. And that was the most fulfilling thing to me. And it was absolutely amazing. This was also a summer where I started practicing, like the no fap. Like I was just like restricting on everything. And that was super transformational, holding back my desires and my urges and sin and staying away from it. That was super transformational. And it was absolutely amazing. And that summer I had made a really, really good amount of progress. It was awesome. And then after those 3 months, when September had come around, this was not only my 20th birthday, but also I had crossed about 10,000 followers on TikTok. I was really starting to gain traction. I was really starting to gain momentum, and I started to backslide. The ego got to me. I was getting recognized by more and more people, getting more attention from women, and it really started to get to me because that summer I was in the best shape of my life. I had gotten the most shredded I had ever gotten before. And it was, really starting to get to me, the ego. Um, and that's where everything kind of went south. I started backsliding. I started falling into old ways, started messing around with women. I was on dating apps and just completely, ruined my relationship with God almost, like just like completely walked away from it. Didn't feel that close connection I had with him. I was doing old ways. It was very stupid. I was backsliding. And November 3rd, 2023, Friday night, I had just gotten off a shift of delivering pizza, and I'll never forget this night for the rest of my life. I had gotten to a point to where I was miserable. I was so miserable with what I was doing. I wasn't happy. I was backsliding. I thought, all I wanted was to gain, these certain amount of followers, and I was finally going to be happy when I had an audience. That didn't make me happy. I was miserable with myself. I hated my life again. And that night, I had gotten home from delivering pizza, and I don't know what it was, but something in me made me want to watch a YouTube video about Jesus. And, prior to this, I was building my relationship with God, but I really didn't know. The reason this struck me so hard was because, like, I knew obviously, like, what Jesus did in the cross and everything, but like, I didn't know the extent of it. I didn't really know the extent of like what actually happened, like what Jesus really did for us, like what they did to him. Um, and I watched that video, man, and it just like it pierced my heart. It pierced my heart. I remember that was like I just broke down. That was the first time that I'd actually truly prayed from my heart. The first time in my life I'd actually prayed from the heart. And I just let it all out. I said, Lord, like I'm done trying to go my own way. I don't have it all figured out. I'm ruining my life. Like I just told the Lord to take my life. Literally just take over, take the driving wheel. Like I'm done. I'm done trying to figure everything out and do this on my own. I told him I can't. I surrender. And it had literally felt like the whole world was lifted off of my shoulders, and I just had this overwhelming sense of peace and happiness and joy and this like insane like warmth, like this like you can't even like describe it, just this supernatural warmth, like almost like God was literally like just hugging me. And I'll never forget that night for the rest of my life. I had felt completely transformed. It was so different. I woke up that next morning and no longer desired to curse, no longer desired to do some of the old bad habits that I was doing. And I was just like, I had this fire for God, man. Like, I literally, the worst, position I'd ever been in my whole entire life, you know, from a worldly standpoint, super broke, couldn't pay my own bills, nothing going for me, no money, delivering pizza, and yet I was the happiest I'd ever been in my whole entire life because I had God. And that's powerful. And that's the day that God showed me that I no longer need anything but him, because no matter what this world can give me, I'm never going to be happy. And that was powerful. That was really powerful to me. And I had this spiritual high for like 3 months. And I remember right after I was reborn, I had prayed to God and I was like, I'm done, messing around. I'm done doing these dating apps. I'm done trying to find the right woman. I told him that I trust that at the right time, he will send the right woman into my life. And I trusted him on that. 3 weeks later, I met Blake. And I knew right away she was from God. There was no question about it. That's actually how we met was, we kind of shared with each other our testimonies of how we both got closer to God, and that's what brought us together. And I remember the first phone call I ever had with her. It was like 4.5 hours long, and it had felt like I had known her my whole life. It had felt like I had known her my whole life, and I had never connected with someone that deeply. And I knew right from there. And then a week later, I actually took her to church. And that was actually the first time in my life that I started going to church. Um, and when I took her to church, that's when I knew. I knew that she was the one. She was sent from God. I got the validation from the Lord, and I just knew. And we continued to build our relationship from there. And she's the only woman that came into my life and actually just loved me for me. She didn't care about the money I was making. She didn't care about my job. She didn't care about the car I was driving. And she's truly the biggest part of why I'm in the position I am now. You know, she pushed me through everything, everything. I was at a point where, my mom was working 3 jobs. I couldn't afford to pay my own bills. You know, I had Blake now. I could barely afford to take her out to a nice dinner once a month. Couldn't afford to buy her nice things. And then this is when, I took the biggest risk of my life. I remember nights, I had built a really, you know, big audience at this point, right? I continued posting. Everything was going well. I had about 6,000 followers on Instagram. I had about 60,000 on TikTok, and I was still making $0. And come June of 2024, that's when, everything changed. Everything. I remember nights praying to God, bawling my eyes out to open a door, to show me some way to go. And He opened the door. It wasn't a very comfortable door, but He opened it. And I had invested into my first mentor, $200 to my name, took on a 5K loan that I couldn't afford. And this is where it all started. I remember that night that I made that decision, literally I was crying on the phone to Blake. I couldn't believe what I just did. I was like, I really messed up. I just, everything happened so fast. I just invested into something I can't afford. What if this doesn't work? And she talked me through it. She was like, Jake, you made the decision. All you can do now is give it your all and see what happens. You can do this. And she believed in me. And that changed everything. I literally took that fire, I took that pressure I had, and that is the hardest I ever worked in my whole entire life, and I turned everything around. And I had made $20,000 in my first 2 months of fitness coaching, and my life was completely changed forever. I quit my job. I remember the feeling of, finally being able to take Blake out to dinner. That wasn't just for our anniversary, but I could actually afford it and not have to look at the bill and get uncomfortable, right? I could just, put my card down and not even have to worry about it. And that was the best feeling in the world, But the bad thing is, as I started making money quicker, and I was able to purchase nice things like my car and everything like that. Now I'm in my own apartment, and it started to pull me away from God a little bit. I started to kind of idolize my business, put the money above God. I obsessed over it, and it destroyed me very quickly. I had gotten to a point to where I was sitting in my dream car, working, my dream job, running my dream business with more money than I knew what to do with. And I was the most miserable and empty I'd ever been in my whole entire life. And I cried out to God. I couldn't believe that I had put all this above Him, and I walked away from Him, and I knew it. And there was no worse feeling than that. I was sitting in every blessing that I had once prayed for and more, yet I was the most miserable I'd ever been in my life. And that was the day that God showed me that no matter what I gain from this world, if I don't have Him, it's useless. It's never going to make me happy. And I doubled down on my relationship with God. It hasn't been perfect. I still have a lot of things that, I need to surrender within my life right now currently, but He's cleaning me up. And that's the thing, and that's what a lot of people don't understand about Christianity. Christianity isn't about being perfect. It's about acknowledging our imperfections and acknowledging our sinful nature and how disgusting we really are, and following the one who is perfect and the only one that can actually clean up our lives and make us more like Him. That's what happens when you follow Jesus. Is it's not, you're never going to be perfect, but the closer you get to Him, the more you get to know Him, the more like Him you're going to start to become. And it cleans up our lives and us as human beings and makes us better for everyone around us. And that's what's important. And I've doubled down on my relationship with God and finally surrendered the business to Him and everything like that. And now I allow God to work through me within my content, within my business, within the way that I coach my clients. He attracts me people who are like-minded, same beliefs, same values. Typically the guys I tend to work with are all Christian, and it's a beautiful thing. They don't buy from me, obviously, to get closer to God, but it's something that happens naturally within the process. It's a beautiful thing, and I'm so grateful and thankful for it. And I'm in a position now, with moving into this apartment with Blake and everything. Um, Obviously there's temptations and things, and um, it's something we're trying to navigate and get through and seek God for. And not perfect. And there's been a lot of things within the relationship that I'm not proud of, right? As far as like money, sometimes I feel like money was not only the greatest blessing, but also something that wasn't good, because sometimes my lack of being present, or whatever it may be, sometimes um, we think that like money can make up for the way that we treat someone, or our lack of being present, things like that. And it's not right. Blake's never cared about the money. She's never cared about the car I drive. She just wants to be loved, and she loves me for who I am. And that's what I'm really navigating through with God, is how can I be the best man possible for her, even while dealing with the stress of business and all that type of stuff. Because it can be destructive. And that's why, going through the entrepreneurship journey, you can't do it without God. If you're not grounded with God, it's going to destroy you so fast. You'll get sucked into the world so fast, and it will, you will lose yourself as a man. And it's the worst thing that can happen. And I'm so thankful to have learned these, valuable lessons at such a young age. It's the greatest blessing that God has humbled me many times to get me back on the right track. And I'll always be so thankful for that. And one of my biggest whys now, obviously when I first started my business, it was not only for Blake, but also, just my mom. And all I really wanted was just, fitness was the biggest part of my life. And all I wanted to do was to be able to help people make that same transformation that I made within my life, and actually work a job that I love doing every single day, work for myself, something I'm passionate about, and make an income doing that, right? Like, I just want the money for the freedom, and obviously to take care of the people I love. I don't think it's a bad thing to make a lot of money. I don't think it's a bad thing to buy nice things. I think the problem is when people make that the center of their life and they put it above God, because that's when it actually gets dangerous. I do truly believe that every single man should want to be successful. I do believe that every single man should want to be financially free, not for themselves, but to take care of their family, their future family, and the people that they love, and to bless others who are less fortunate. Truly to make an impact in this world and do great things and actually help people, because that is what we're called to do. I don't think it's a bad thing at all to make a lot of money as a Christian, as long as your heart is in the right position and you are grounded with God. That's the most important thing, to actually do good with, the wealth and success that you have acquired. And one of my biggest whys right now is, with Blake, she pushed me, and if it wasn't for her, I don't think I'd be in the position I am now. I don't think I'd be at, the position I'm at with this business. If I didn't meet her, I don't even think I would have started this business, right? She was one of my biggest drives for doing it. And one of my biggest whys now, especially with being in this apartment, is, now she's trying to build her career with law school and going through all of that. And I just want to take all of the stress off of her, all of the stress, right? I don't want her to have to pay for anything. I don't ever want her to have to worry about money. I want all of that, right? I want to take that off of her as much as I possibly can. And, that was the thing. When I first started making money, she never paid for dinners or vacation or anything like that. And that's how I think it should be. I do think the man is the one who's supposed to provide for the woman. Um, but, obviously living at home, it was a lot more comfortable. I didn't have to pay rent. I didn't have to pay for a ton of bills, right? So that's been the biggest change, is like, definitely moving in this apartment, it drives me a lot more. I'm responsible for a lot more. I'm in charge of a lot more expenses, it's all on me, and that's something I wanted, right? And it's like, while Blake is the biggest part of why I'm in the position I am, and why I'm at the point I'm at, right? I want to do that same thing for her while she's building her career. These are going to be the 3 hardest years of her life, becoming a lawyer. And I want to take that stress off of her, pay the full rent, pay all the bills, you know, pay for dinners, everything, take care of everything. I don't want her to ever have to stress about money or anything like that. I just want her to be able to focus on her law school. And, I know when she gets out, she's going to be very successful. And it's a beautiful thing. We're both building our futures together with God. And it's a beautiful thing. God is the biggest part of who I am. He's the biggest part of my story. He's the biggest part of my success. And I can assure you guys that, that was the most important decision I'd ever made in my whole entire life. Yes, I've had ups and downs. Yes, I've backslid a lot. Yes, there's been times where my relationship with God has been really shaky. But the beautiful thing is, no matter how far I walk away, I know God is always right there waiting with open arms. And that's the thing. A lot of the times, God's going to let us walk away because it's the only thing that will actually humble us. It's the only thing that's going to teach us that we don't have it all figured out. We're not in control. And it points us back into His direction, knowing that, we need Him, recognizing our dependence for Him. And that's the beautiful thing, is that no matter what you do, no matter how far you walk away from God, no matter how much you know, basically don't want a relationship with Him, or you don't want a part of Him, or as much as you push Him away, He will always love you more than you can comprehend, and He will always be waiting there with open arms. And it's a beautiful thing. It's a love that we can't comprehend. It's a love that is beyond human love. We will never understand it, but if there's anything you guys can get from this video, especially with the times we're in, I just pray that each and every single one of you watching would really deeply consider giving your life to Christ and building a relationship with Him, because nothing of this world is ever going to fill that God-sized hole that you have in your heart. I promise you, it's easier said than done, but a lot of us look in all the wrong places for that fulfillment and that peace and that purpose, and it can only be found in God. Only can be found in God. Happiness doesn't come from this world. It doesn't. We live in a corrupt world. We live in a sinful world. And, the only one who can give us what we're looking for is the one who is perfect, who created everything. And that is God. I'm telling you, we were all made in His image. We all long to, have God's love. And a lot of people look for it in the wrong things. But I promise you, that is the most important decision you will ever make in your whole entire life, is to give your life to Jesus and build a relationship with Him and follow Him. Don't look in the wrong places, because I promise you, I've been there. None of it is going to make you happy or fulfill you like God truly can. That's my story. That's my testimony. I hope I hope this hit you guys. I really do. I hope it, hit a certain part of your heart. And that's my intention, is allowing God to work through me with this to impact you guys and, inspire you guys to build a relationship with Christ. God bless you guys. I love you all. Please deeply consider giving your life to Christ and building a relationship with Him. I promise you, you will never, ever regret it.